The BrewEasy, a two-vessel rim system by Blichmann Engineering, designed for the home brewer, like me. If you'd like to see what I think of it, stick around and I'll show you. Hello and welcome back, Larry here again. Today I am going to talk about the BrewEasy by Blichmann Engineering. You just saw in the video montage there that I brewed on this thing, and I brewed on it just once so far. The beer is down in the fermenter bubbling away, and I am looking forward to drinking it. And those who were curious as to what beer that was in the video, it's a Munich Dunkel, and I hope to do a video on that in the very near future. That's not what the topic of this video is. This video is solely about the BrewEasy and my experience with it so far. For those who don't know what this system is, you must be new to home brewing, because those who've been doing it for a number of years, it's been around a while, right? I can't remember how far back it goes, maybe a decade or so. It's 2020. I've been brewing since 2000, and it wasn't so many years later, maybe about 10 years later, where I first caught wind of the BrewEasy myself. So it's actually one of the more original sort of these, not quite all-in-one systems, but it's definitely a non-traditional design. It doesn't have the three traditional kettles for the mash tun, boil kettle and hot liquor tank. It's not like the Grainfather or in any other brew in the bag system where you brew in a bag or in a basket, right? This is a two-vessel hybrid way of going about it, and it uses rims, which is, for those who don't know that terminology, it stands for recirculating, well, hold on, I got a cheat sheet here because I almost forgot. Recirculating Infusion Mash System. See, they call it their K-rims or kettle rims process, and it's a unique device. It caught my eye years ago when I was just getting into all grain, and the price tag at the time, and even today, would shy a lot of people away from it. So it's been well known to me in the background from seeing ads for it and things online about it over the years, and I was totally stoked when they offered to send me one of these recently to give my review on here. And man, I was so excited. I couldn't wait to get to it. Now, the system they sent me was their 10-gallon batch size 240 volt system, electric system, right? So they have other variations of this. They have gas systems and electric systems. They have different sizes as well. They have, I think, a 5-gallon batch size, a 10-gallon batch size, and a 20-gallon batch size. And I think the 5-gallon batch size has got a 120 volt electric option for those here in the US. The 240 volt starts at the 10-gallon size again, which is what I have. And they even have a bigger size, I think a 20-gallon final batch size, which is also 240 or gas. So there's a variety of options with this system, and it's highly configurable. They even gave me a choice as to where to put my ports on this thing, from the Element to the Whirlpool port and the like, right? So that was a huge thing that I liked about it right out of the gate. Even before I got my hands on it, I was able to customize how it was going to be laid out before I even got it. So to walk around this thing a little bit, So with the 10-gallon batch size system that I have, it comes with 2 vessels, a 20-gallon kettle for the boil kettle down below, which also doubles as a hot liquor tank early on, which you probably saw in that montage, right? And then above it sits, well, first there's an adapter ring that sits on top of it, and then on top of that sits for my size, a 15-gallon mash tun. And the mash tun had an Autosparge option. I think that's optional. I'm not sure. I have to double check that. So going down to the kettle, I chose the electric option, and the electric option comes with the electric element they call the boil coil. Now this boil coil is not your traditional straight or zigzaggy heating element that you get in other systems, right? It's actually circular, and it fits around the outer circumference of the inside of the pot, if that makes sense to you. It allows you to put a immersion chiller into the kettle and not have to have a stand. You may have seen me on the other system where I had to use a stand to lift the immersion chiller above the element. That's not necessary here. This sits right in the bottom of the kettle. For me, as an immersion chiller owner, it's a big plus. And this thing also comes with a couple of linear valves or ports, right? Now, these are weldless fittings. These are not welded on, so you have to assemble them with the O-ring to get them on there. It was kind of a good thing because they also sent with these valves a Teflon washer and O-ring option, which allows me to, or allows you, if you were to have one of these, to actually rotate the valve. And why would you want to rotate a valve? Well, if you have a boil kettle with a bunch of Trub and hops down at the bottom and you want to rack off of it, you can actually rotate that valve with your hands a little bit to get the pickup tube out of the Trub. And that was kind of nice. I appreciate the thought in that. They did send me the HopBlocker, which is also another option for keeping Trub out of the system. And they had a lot of promise. I was really excited to use it. I installed it, and it fit with the boil coil. It was a little bit of a tight fit, but it does work. However, when I went to go put my immersion chillers in there, because I have a few different ones of different sizes, they all would not fit in there in the center with that HopBlocker gadget in there. So I actually had to remove it and do without it. And luckily, I had that backup option to use the rotating valve, which I really liked. That was cool. Moving on to the mash tun, you couldn't just put the mash tun on top of the kettle, right? There's an adapter piece in there that sits on top of the kettle where you put the mash tun on, right? Once you get that on there, you have a much smaller footprint. Your kettles are not spread out. They're stacked one over the other, which is kind of nice, especially if you're tight on space. And it comes with a false bottom. And I've never used this style of false bottom before. As you know, I'm a guy who uses manifolds because that's what I've always done and always known, and they're easy to make at home. This, I didn't have to make at home, right? This came with the system, and as you can see, it's like this stamped plate with these little slits in them that keep the grains from passing through, but allow the wort to pass through down below where it gets picked up by the pickup tube in the mash tun. I didn't get any grain in my kettle at all. Now, as part of the mash tun, I also had their Autosparge arm, which I've never used before as well. So that was a nice treat to give that a shot. There was one other thing I really liked about the mash tun here. On the drain tube out of the mash tun down into the kettle, what was really cool is that dip tube came with about a half dozen different sized rubber washers with different openings, different orifices in them, which help control the flow rate for you. So you don't have to do a lot of guesswork trying to slowly dial in one or more valves to get the flow rate that you want. Because when you recirculate this from the kettle down below and recirculate it to the top of the mash tun and let it go down, filter through all the grain and back out into the drain tube, all you have to do is open that valve all the way open. And if you choose the right orifice, which I believe I did for my first outing, that was lucky. It worked really good, opened everything wide open, and between the Autosparge and that rubber orifice that's sized just the right way, it was pretty much hands off in terms of trying to get the flow rate right. It was awesome. This system also came with one of the Riptide pumps. Now, the Riptide pumps I like. I got one a number of months ago after using a chugger pump for a number of years and getting tired of its noisiness, especially when I'm doing videos like this and live streams. Having that constant hum around can give me a headache and kind of interfere with the audio. So this came with one of the Riptide pumps, and it's very quiet, and it's good because the system like this basically the pump is on all the time. It's always either recirculating from the kettle up to the mash tun, or you're doing whirlpooling, or you're recirculating, because the way the system is designed, with the BrewCommander control device, with its touch screen and ability to control temperatures and timers, the temperature sensor for it is inserted into the output of the pump. So unless that pump is constantly running, you won't have an accurate temperature on your controller, and right? So you have to have this thing constantly running. So if you are going to use this system, I would highly recommend you do it with one of their pumps, because the other pumps I've seen are pretty darn noisy, and to spend 3-4 hours brewing with a constant sound can get out of just anyway. Enough said about that. Now, I mentioned their BrewCommander controller. It's my first time using one, except when I was at that brewery back in February. If you recall, they had one there to control their devices, but I let that brewmaster there, Aaron, I think his name was, to go through and do all that stuff because it was his system, right? Now I got to play with one, right? And it was really great. It's touch screen. It's got, so you can touch it and you can change the temperature manually up and down right there on the screen. You can change the power percentage. You can go up from an auto mode where you punch in a number and just hit auto and pump, and it will start circulating and heating up your water to your temperature. Or you can set it to on to boil mode and it goes full bore, or to whatever percentage that you dial into this thing. So I was playing with that a bit. It also comes with the ability to set up mash profiles and boil profiles, which is basically for the boil, a timer to remind you when to put certain additions in, right? So you can set those kind of things up too. And it's got just a flat out timer on the thing. And what I liked about it was the ability to calibrate it through the settings menu. They have some basic and advanced settings in there that allow you to input an offset to adjust for where the temperature sensor is down in the pump to where the mash tun is. And if you have a very accurate thermometer like I do, I use a ThermaPen. For those of you who've never done 240 volt brewing or 220 volt or whatever, and don't know that there's different standards for 240 volt brewing, especially here in the US, there's several. I mean, there's a whole chart that you can find on Wikipedia or online showing all the different combinations of 240 volt systems, from 3-prong to 4-prong. And that's not just it. There's like 20 amp, 30 amp, 50 amp, and they all have different plug and receptacle arrangements that you have to get exactly right in order for this thing to work. And mine came with a 3-prong L6-30 plug, right? And I have a 1430 plug, 4-prong plug, right, in my wall. So I had to get an adapter for it. Now, Blichmann sells adapters for it, but I couldn't wait because it was a holiday weekend, and I didn't want to wait till this week to have them ship one out, so I wouldn't be able to brew till at least next week. So I just went ahead and got one on my own. I think it was Amazon or something, next day shipping, and it turned out fine. So this adapter plugged into my wall, plugged into their BrewCommander. The BrewCommander also has a 120 volt plug that needs to be plugged into a 120 volt outlet. So you actually need 2 outlets with this system, a 240 volt outlet that matches or that can adapt to their system, plus a regular 120 volt outlet. But after I got my parts and put it all together, I did a wet run on this thing, and not a dry run, but I filled it with water and I brought it to a boil, and I ran it through sort of a faux brew day where I was able to measure the dead spaces in both the mash tun, the kettle, the ramp rate to heat the water up, which I put into the BrewCommander. I was able to get the boil off rate, everything like that. So, which is important when all grain brewing, right? In order to use it in your brewing software or your hand calcs to estimate how much grain you need and the like. I put all that into my spreadsheet, and I have a new version coming out, by the way, version 3.6, which will have this Blichmann profile in it. So if you are a Blichmann BrewEasy owner or thinking about getting one, I'll have some information already in that spreadsheet for you. The brew kettle and the mash tun both have level gauges on them, which are nice. They don't have the etchings on the inside. The etchings that you see on inside of kettles could be scraped and rubbed off over time. And they're also sometimes hard to read because the steam coming out of the thing and you're trying to get a reading, it's hard to do. So these level gauges are nice, but they do require some cleaning. So it's another extra step after brew day. So, there's a little trade-off there, but it was fun to use them for a change. And I think I do like them. But the one thing that really started to wear on me after a while, having to screw and unscrew the linear valves and all the fittings to either open valves, to shut valves, or to switch hoses, or to reassemble it for cleaning and disassemble for cleaning, whatever. It was a lot of turns. I mean, those linear valves are on the upside very accurate because you can really fine tune your flow rates with them, because I mean, a small turn is a very small increment of flow control. So it's very good at fine tuning. The downside is that you're turning a lot to open and close and to remove and put things on. And I found myself after a couple hours or more longing for some quick disconnects or cam locks or whatever, right? Again. But the good news is if that's your thing, if that's your bag baby, you definitely want to maybe go out and get them. Go get some cam locks. Go get some quick disconnects. These fittings on the Blichmann BrewEasy, they're all 1/2 inch national pipe thread. So you can go put on your own adapters on there and put your own fittings on. Maybe I'll do that someday too, but for the time being, I'm going to use it as it's designed because I want to give my experience of the system to you as it is now before I start doing videos in the future about what I've done to it to make my day easier. Oh, and did I say I hit my numbers? No, I didn't. So because I did all that wet run stuff where I went ahead and measured the dead spaces, the boil off rates, I put all that into my spreadsheet and came out with my as design recipe, right, for my losses and every step along the way, and my final numbers for my ABV to the IBUs to the, whatever. What happened is that I got a 72% mash efficiency. Now they say in the manual you get anywhere between 68 to 72 in the try 70. Well, I got 72 out of this thing on my very first time out at using this thing. So that's really good for basically what we're doing with this system. I'm not sure if I can get it higher than that, but I was happy with 72. I used 70 as my parameter when I designed the recipe, and I came up with 72. But hey, that's great. That's about what I expected anyway, and that's how I designed my recipe, and everything turned out fine. Another upside is that these kettles, both the mash tun and the boil kettle, had pretty low dead spaces, pretty small volumes, which is good, right? I've got other kettles here, which for the same size was wasting about 5 quarts of water as a dead space at the bottom of the kettle, which means the liquid that would not drain out of the bottom spigot. This one, I think I wrote down here, I think I had a 1/2 quart for the 15-gallon mash tun and I think 1.2 quarts for the 20-gallon kettle. One thing I really did like about this 2-vessel BrewEasy system was that I could control my grist ratio, and I haven't been able to do that for a while on some of these other systems, right? So for those of you who don't know what a grist ratio is, it's the ratio of water to grain in your mash, right? So a number that's common one is 1.5 quarts per pound of grain. 1.5 quarts of water per pound of grain, and that gives you a certain mash consistency, a thickness while it's mashing, and there's some academia behind why you want to go with a thicker mash or a thinner mash, and how the enzymes react and behave and all this stuff like that in there, right? Here with a system like the BrewEasy, you can actually calculate, I want 1.25 quarts per pound, and you can get that. And finally, you may have seen the KettleKart, the cart down underneath this thing with the 4 wheels, the 4 locking casters, which they also sell as an accessory to the BrewEasy. It will allow you to wheel this thing into a corner like I do at the end of my brew day and wheel it out. And also it lets you set it up in your garage or brew space, wherever you may need it to be. And you can change that position at will without having to pick your table or your little stool and move it around and everything. It's definitely a cool add-on. So what are my next steps? Well, I'm not sure, but I think I am going to attempt to do a 5-gallon batch. This is what I did with the Spike Solo, right? I did a 10-gallon batch, and then I did a 5-gallon batch in it to see how well it did, and that was fine too. So I'm kind of thinking about doing the same experiment here, trying to see what it takes to do a 5-gallon batch in this system, and some of the pitfalls or pros and cons to like doing a smaller batch in this system. And I want to get some more data points. I mean, I've only brewed on this thing once. I want to get some more data to maybe dial in on my boil off rate, for example, maybe figure out which power settings work best for my boils, maybe make sure my dead spaces I measured are accurate, kind of get sort of a baseline of information so I can dial in this system on my brewing spreadsheet and then therefore dial in my recipes better later. All right, that was a lot of information I threw at you guys. I hope it wasn't too much. If you found it informative and you liked the video, make sure you hit that thumbs up button for me for the algorithm, okay? And if you're a new viewer and not yet a subscriber, you may want to consider subscribing. I do a lot of home brewing, cooking videos, some DIY content around both, and generally just share my hobby with you. All right, so if those kind of things interest you, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to get notified of new videos coming up. And for everyone, thanks for watching. I will talk to you all later.